week, the Federal Open Market Committee decided to raise the target range for the federal funds rate by 1/4 percentage point, bringing it to 1 to 1/4%.
The Federal Reserve is trying to stack the deck against President Trump raising interest rates.
It's interesting that during the entire term where Obama was president, the Fed really only raised rates once. I mean, they raised them a second time, but that's after the election. Since Trump was elected, they've already had 3 rate hikes, and they're planning on doing more. But the low interest rates were part of the problem. The Fed needs to raise interest rates, but when they do that, the economy is going to collapse. The whole bubble, the recovery was phony. We don't want to keep the phony recovery going. We want to let it implode so we can have a real recovery built on a solid foundation.
Sure, but Trump's argument is we only gave the bubble to the elites. Why not give some bubble to the people?
Well, the people don't want a bubble. They want genuine prosperity. They don't want to be deluded into thinking that things are getting better as they're actually getting worse. The only way to have a real recovery is going to have, we need massive cuts in government spending. And Donald Trump wants to increase government spending. He's talking about spending more money.
But see, his argument is it's a tax cut to slash regulations. I mean, isn't that one of the purest tax cuts there is?
Well, look, we need to get rid of regulations, and I wish we could. Look, we can't even get rid of Obamacare. I mean, they want to replace it with something that's almost as bad and might even be worse.
No, I agree with you. And that's the one big ding on Trump. That's the one big ding is this Obamacare thing has not been a real reform so far. So let me ask you this, Peter Schiff. What do you think would have happened if Hillary was in with her policy she was saying, and then A, and then B, what do you think Trump should do?
Well, look, I think if Hillary had won, a lot of the optimism surrounding the prospect of lower taxes and deregulation wouldn't be there. And my guess is that the Fed, that claims to be data dependent, would not have been raising interest rates in the face of this horrible data. So I do think that politics are playing a role here. And I think a reason that the Fed is ignoring the weak data is because they're not afraid of collapsing the bubble on Trump's watch.
Incredible.
But they were on Obama's or Hillary Clinton's. But I do believe that the Fed is going to go back to their old tricks. I mean, once this economy is obviously in recession, once the numbers clearly reveal that we are back in recession.
Yeah, they want to have the cake, eat it too. They want to hurt Trump and then bring back, you're 100% dead on. So tell us what else you think they're going to do, Peter Schiff.
Well, I said once we go back into recession, and they can maybe blame it on Trump, you know, especially since Trump has made the mistake of pinning his presidency on the stock market or this economy. When the economy tanks and the stock market tanks, and now the Fed can try to save it and say, look what Donald Trump did. He wrecked this great economy, and now we have to come bail him out. We have to do more QE, we have to cut interest rates, and that may lay a foundation for, you know, Democrats to run against Trump and how he wrecked the economy in the midterm elections, and then again in the president for 2020. I think candidate Trump had a lot better or more accurate view of the U.S. economy than President Trump, because candidate Trump was a lot more accurate in criticizing the phony numbers that the government used to try to paint a rosy picture of the economy. He was very critical of the way the government measured and reported unemployment, inflation, and of course, he called the stock market a big, fat, ugly bubble. He recognized the consequence of the cheap money policies of the Fed, and that the stock market was not a good barometer of the overall economy. And on that, that's what got him elected. I mean, that resonated with the public that had been spoon-fed nonsense by the administration about how great the economy was when they knew it was lousy. And now Trump is president, and he is spoon-feeding the same nonsense. Just look at the overall S&P 500. We haven't had valuations this high since the bubble in 1999-2000, and look how that ended. But the point is that the Fed did this. The market is a creation of the Fed. It's all about cheap money and liquidity. And if they withdraw that, then the market's going to come down. It's only a question of time, and it's going to come down hard. And who's going to get blamed for it? And since Trump has already said, look, the market is going up, that means I'm doing a good job. So instead of saying, hey, the stock market going up shows I'm a good president, the stock market coming down means that he's doing things that will actually help the economy. The air is going to come out of this bubble, just like it did on George Bush. Remember, the Fed inflated that phony recovery when it blew up the housing bubble. And that bubble, though, didn't survive the second term of Bush. It blew up while Bush was still president. And that's what helped Barack Obama become president.
Peter's right also that the entire bubble was created by Obama with zero interest rates and this quantitative easing, which people don't realize is the Fed's balance sheet ballooned with the Fed buying Treasury debt. We bought our own debt in order to keep the Obama doubling the national debt to $20 trillion. It was a huge ride on borrowed money.
Most Americans do not understand this, but the truth is that the Federal Reserve has a lot more power over the US economy than anybody else does. And that includes Donald J. Trump. Politicians tend to get the credit or the blame for how the economy is performing. But in reality, it is an unelected, unaccountable panel of central bankers that is running the show. And until something is done about the Fed, our long-term economic problems will never ever be fixed. I'm going to explain why the Federal Reserve is currently setting the stage for another recession, a new housing crisis, and a stock market crash. And if those things happen, unfortunately, it will be Trump that will be primarily to blame. In this year, the Federal Reserve is expected to hike interest rates, and there is even the possibility that they will call for an acceleration of future rate hikes. Economists generally believe the central bank's median estimate will continue to call for 3/4 point rate increases both this year and next year in 2018. But there's some risk that it gets pushed to 4 as inflation nears the Fed's annual 2% target, and business confidence keeps juicing markets in anticipation of President Trump's plan to cut taxes and regulations. During the Obama years, the Federal Reserve pushed interest rates all the way to the floor, and this artificially boosted the economy. In a recent article, Gail Terberg explained how this works. With falling interest rates, monthly payments can be lower, even if prices of homes and cars rise. Therefore, more people can afford homes than cars, and factories are less expensive to build. The whole economy is boosted by increased demand. Really, increased affordability for high-priced goods. Thanks to the lower monthly payments, asset prices, such as home prices and farm prices, can rise because the reduced interest rate for debt makes them more affordable to buyers. Assets that people already own tend to inflate, making them feel richer. In fact, owners of assets such as homes can borrow part of the increased equity, giving them more spendable income for other things. This is part of what happened leading up to the financial crash of 2008. But the opposite is also true. When interest rates rise, borrowing money becomes more expensive and economic activity slows down. For the Federal Reserve to raise interest rates right now is absolutely crazy. As Donald Trump has explained in detail, the US economy is a complete mess right now, and we are teetering on the brink of a new recession. So why in the world would the Fed raise rates unless they wanted to hurt Trump? Raising rates also threatens to bring on a new housing crisis. Interest rates were raised prior to the subprime mortgage meltdown in 2007 and 8, and now we could see history repeating itself. When rates go higher, it becomes significantly more difficult for families to afford their mortgage payments. The rate on a 30-year fixed mortgage reached its all-time low back in November 2012 at just 3.31%. As of this week, it was 3.9%, and by the end of 2018, it could go as high as 5.5%. Forecasts Matthew Poynton, a property economist for Capital Economics. He points out that for a homeowner with a $250,000 mortgage fixed at 3.8%, annual payments of $14,000. If that homeowner moved to a similarly priced home but had a 5.5% rate, their annual repayments would rise by $3,000 a year to $17,000. Of course, stocks investors do not like rising rates at all either. Stocks tend to rise in low-rate environments, such as we had for the past several years, and they tend to fall in high-rate environments. And according to CNBC, a coming stock market correction could be just around the corner. Investors are in for a rude awakening about a coming stock market correction. Most just don't know it yet. No one knows when the crash will come or what will cause it, and no one can. But what's worse for most investors is they have no clue how much they stand to lose when it inevitably happens. If you look at the market historically, we have had on average a crash about every 8 to 10 years, and essentially the average loss is about 42%, said Kendrick Waitman, CEO of financial technology and investment analytics firm FinMason. This stock market bubble was not primarily created by Barack Obama, Trump, or any other politician. Rather, the Federal Reserve was primarily responsible for creating it by pushing interest rates all the way to the floor during the Obama era and by flooding the financial system with hot money during several stages of quantitative easing. But now, the economy is slowing down. Economic growth on an annual basis was just at 0.7% during the first quarter, and yet the Federal Reserve is talking about raising interest rates anyway. The Federal Reserve also raised interest rates in a slowing economy in the late 1930s, and that had the effect of significantly extending the economic problems during that decade. There have been 18 recessions or depressions since the Federal Reserve was created in 1913, and now we stand on the precipice of another one. After this next crisis, hopefully Congress will finally understand that it is now the time to shut the Federal Reserve down for good. Ron Paul is someone that I look up to greatly, and he also agrees that the blame for the coming crisis should be placed on the Federal Reserve instead of Donald J. Trump. There are some dire predictions that say in the next year or 18 months we have something arriving worse than back in 2008 and 2009. The downturn is much worse, Paul said in a recent interview with liberty-minded anti-globalist radio host Alex Jones. They'll say it's all Trump's fault. No, it wasn't. 08 and 09 wasn't Obama's fault. It was the fault of the Federal Reserves. It was the fault of the Keynesian economic model. The spending too much, the deficit, so unfortunately there's nothing he can do. Trump can't do it. Dr. Ron Paul, who took a keen interest in economics throughout his celebrated career as a constitutionalist in Congress, said Trump could help the situation by pursuing good policies, but you can't avoid the correction. The correction is locked in place because the deficits are there. The malinvestment, everybody agrees, interest rates have been too low for too long, he said in the late January interview. The only thing he can do is allow the recession to come, get it over with, liquidate the debt. Politically, nobody wants that. So you're going to see runaway inflation before you see this country wake up. When stocks will start to fall, how low could they ultimately go? One technical analyst that has a stunning record of predicting short-term stock market declines in recent years is saying that the Dow could potentially drop by more than 6,000 points to 14,800. But if the technical stars collide, as one charist predicts, the blue chip gauge could soon plunge by more than 6,000 points to 14,800. That's nearly 30% lower, which is based on Friday's close. Sandy Jadeja, Chief Market Strategist at Master Trading Strategies, claims several predicted stock market crashes to his name, all of them called days or even weeks in advance. He told CNBC viewers, for example, that the August 2015 flash crash was coming 18 days before it hit. He's also made prescient calls on gold and crude oil, and he's extremely concerned about what this year could bring for investors. The timeline is rapidly approaching for the next potential Dow meltdown, said Jadeja, who shares his techniques via workshops and seminars. Most big stock market crashes tend to happen in the fall, but the truth is that they can literally happen at any time. Whether you want to call it a crash, a correction, or something else, the truth is that a major downturn is coming for stocks, and the only question is, when will it happen? And when things start to get bad, most of the blame will be on Trump. But it won't primarily be his fault. It was the Federal Reserve that created this massive financial bubble, and they will also be responsible for making it pop. Hopefully, we can get American people to understand how these things really work, so that accountability for what is coming can be placed where it belongs. If you want to see more videos like this, subscribe to our channel and make sure you join our notification squad. God bless you.